Good afternoon, buenos dias, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of all of us at the locally based, independently owned bookstore Books and Books in Miami, Florida, and in partnership with Miami Book Fair, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual afternoon with Camilla Läckberg to discuss Silver Tears, published by our friends at Alfred A. Knopf. Camilla Läckberg is the prize-winning best-selling author of the Fjällbacka series, which has sold more than 23 million copies worldwide. Her books are sold in more than 60 countries and have been translated into 43 languages. She lives in Stockholm, Sweden, from where she joins us this afternoon. To moderate our conversation today, we're joined by Lisa Unger. Lisa is the New York Times and internationally best-selling author of 18 novels, including Confessions on the 745, published last year, with millions of readers worldwide and books published in 26 languages. Lisa is widely regarded as a master of suspense. Throughout this afternoon's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by using the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen, and you can order your copy of Silver Tears or any other book from Books and Books below by pressing the green button. We appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Camilla, I'm so excited to be speaking with you. I'm a huge fan, and I have been devouring your book, Silver Tears. Thank you for spending a little time with me, for hanging out. And I was first, I guess I read The Golden Cage, which I absolutely loved. And of course we won't talk too much about that. But Silver Tears is I'm not going to say sequel, but like the follow-up to that book. I mean, Golden Cage ended on quite the cliffhanger, and those of us who loved it were like, what's going to happen? And so we're so thrilled to read Silver Tears. But I also just think it's important to say that I think this book stands alone really well. I think it really is. It's its own thing, and it's actually. So I have a question, but I'm trying to like figure out how to phrase it without ruining anything for anybody. But I'm so intrigued by the character of Faye, and I know that she has been, very successful for you, and that a lot of people super connect to her. And I think that part of that reason is because of her journey, right? The journey that she begins in The Golden Cage. She's a very different person there than she is in Silver Tears, and that journey, I think, is one that a lot of women really relate to, So can you talk just a little bit about Faye and about her journey from Golden Cage to Silver Tears?
Well, the situation that happens to Faye, I think we all know women who have happened to be in that situation. And that is a situation where you put everything, you trust in love, you trust in a man, and you put your whole trust in that person. You don't, you sacrifice everything, because that's what women are so good at.
Right.
We're very good at sacrificing.
What we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. Good women are supposed to sacrifice. That's
Yeah.
And that's what she does. She sacrifices everything. And the problem is that you cannot trust anyone but yourself. And when she finds out she can't trust Jack, her husband, she has nothing. She's left with nothing. No love, no support, no money, no place to stay. And this is not some fiction story. As I said when I started, we've all heard these stories.
Absolutely.
And the thing with Faye is that she decides that it won't break her. She finds the strength she's always had, but she kind of forgot for a number of years. And she uses that strength to rise again.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so when we see her at the beginning of Silver Tears, I mean, she has really liberated herself in more ways than one. I was listening on an interview that you did about, how racy and sexy the books are, and how your mom refers to them as the sex books, and you're like,
Yes.
Mom,
And I always
Mom.
go, la, 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 stop that, stop that. Doesn't matter how old you get. You don't want to hear your mom say that.
No. And I was actually thinking of just recently my book Confessions on the 745, when it came out, it actually also starts with a very sort of racy scene. And my father was going on a road trip, and he was like, "Oh, I think I'm going to listen to it in the car with my
You're
friends."
like, no, abort mission. Just turn around the car.
He never brought it up. I don't know how he felt, but I can only imagine. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. But I think that do you view that for Faye? Like, do you view that, like, her sexual freedom as one of the ways in which she sort of liberated herself in this new book?
Yes, because sex is power.
It is. Yes.
Sex is absolutely power. And it's the same in America as in Sweden, that guys are allowed to have a free sexuality, and it is even commended for it. There's studs, etc., etc. And women who have a free sexuality are guilt tripped and shamed. And one thing I wanted to do was set Faye free from that, to be able to have a sexuality, to be sexual, to go after younger men if she wanted to have casual sex if she wanted to. So that was a big part of the book. I wasn't necessarily too keen in the beginning on writing sex scene. I've avoided them for almost 20 years. In my Fjällbacka books, they kind of turn off the light and you have to guess the rest. I'm absolutely fine with that. But this book needed steamy sex scenes because I wanted to set her free.
And I kind of love that about it. I mean, I love that, the scenes themselves are, quite exciting, but also, I love that element of her personality. And it kind of reminds me of, I think I read in some of my Camilla research that I did that, you have this, wonderful series that we all love. And this is a departure from that, but that you had sort of connected to some of your first fictional loves. And I think you mentioned Sidney Sheldon, who as a young person, a young writer, I loved those books. I absolutely devoured those books. They were always like in a row on my mother's bookshelves. I had no censorship when I was a kid. Like, if I could read it, I could read it. Nobody ever stopped me. And I remember just being completely glamored by these big lives, and these sort of, just sort of Gothic almost plot, like modern Gothic type plots. And I noticed that also in Silver Tears, you mentioned him as well. So is that, is he one of your sort of early inspirations? And are there other people that you remember sort of, as a young reader that kind of influenced this book even more so than your series?
Yeah, well, this is actually a mix of two influences. One is, she's named Faye for a reason. She's named after Faye Weldon. The Lives and Lusts of a She-Devil is a book that I've read and reread and reread. I've read it like once per year since I was 15 years old, and it's had such an impact on me. And then I started, thinking about, the Sidney Sheldon, Judith Krantz, Jackie Collins. I read them all, Lace, Mistral's Daughters, Princess Daisy. I read and loved them all. And when I started thinking about them as an adult, because I read them in the 80s as a teenager,
as a kid, right?
Exactly. I also had full access to the bookshelf. Yeah. And what I suddenly realized was that these were books about really strong, powerful women who would take over empires, eat men for breakfast, and be fabulous wearing Chanel and Dior at the same time.
Exactly.
And I was so fascinated that in the 80s, we had this era with books with super powerful, strong women. Yes. And now we have a trend. I love those books too. I have to make that disclaimer. I read them and I love them. But now the trend is a woman in London working in a PR firm, coming home a little bit earlier, finding her husband in bed with her sister or his secretary. And so she's heartbroken. She flees to a house in the countryside she just inherited from her grandpa. She starts a book shop, and she falls in love with the guy who walks the dogs. In essence.
I mean,
and the message in those books are, the right man is the answer to life's mysteries. That's the answer to everything.
Yes. Isn't it though, Camilla? No, it's not. I'm just
married
kidding.
For the third time.
Yeah, the right answer is to find your own power and write your own story. And Faye definitely does that.
Yeah, I do have a theory that you cannot say that you love someone totally and completely as long as you're dependent on that person.
Right.
That is not an equal relationship.
Right. And I think that the idea of, unconditional love is a little bit of a fallacy, because adult love, should be and is conditional.
Yes.
Conditional. Yes. I mean, you may have unconditional love for your child, or for your labradoodle sleeping behind me. But like, adult love is conditional, and that if you are accepting abuse from somebody as a woman and you think you're doing it in the name of love, you're wrong.
Yeah, it's not love.
Yeah, it's not love.
If it hits you, it's not love.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's a pretty base.
Yeah, I mean, that's a baseline.
Right, that's a baseline. So
obvious, but that's the baseline.
Absolutely. So I know this book ends on a cliffhanger, and I know that also, of course, Golden Cage does as well. But I wonder, this brings me to a question that I sort of bring up a lot when I interview people, is this idea of the plotter versus
pantser.
Yes, but I have a new word. Pantser, me too. I have a new word for it, though. I want to call it gardener. Because I feel like
pantser sounds like something a little bit freakish.
Right. Or like just by accident happened to write a book, like by the seat of your pants, which we all know it's not the case. But so can you tell me a little bit about about your process, about how it evolves and how you kind of get from, that moment of excitement, the inspiration, to, the end?
Well, I get the basic idea. I get like the core idea for a book.
Right.
And then I think about it for a while, and I start to do research in the area I need to do research. And I usually have an inkling of how the end will be. And I decide a point to start. And then I just start writing. So I always write chronologically. I'm not one of those the plotters that have Post-it notes with every scene on the wall. I've never worked like that. So I just let the story unfold as it goes.
Right. And that's why I kind of like the gardener analogy. It's like, because you have the seed, you have the idea, and then it starts to grow, and you give it like sort of light and air, and you prune off things that are not working and whatever. And that's how your story evolves. And I honestly don't think it's that different, right? Like the plotter versus the gardener. It's just a matter of how long it takes.
Yeah, they probably spend more time and they do it like Post-its instead of we do it right on paper. Right on the page, exactly. So I think it's not that different a process. But I think what's interesting is that people who write the way we do, like we're always very open to people who plot, and we think, okay, that's cool. But like they're always a little bit like not so nice about how we do it. Well, I have an interesting experiment going now. I'm writing writing a new crime trilogy with a new crime solving couple. And for the first time, I'm writing together with another author, a very dear friend of mine and colleague who's actually a mentalist. So he does these big mentalist shows and writes nonfiction books about how the brain works and how you can, That is so really cool. Interesting. Oh my God, we have a cop that solves murders together with a mentalist. And here's my point. He's a plotter and I'm a pantser, a gardener. So this is really interesting. So he always shows up to our work meetings with a lot of like cue cards.
Right. You're like, oh no.
And I'm like, what are those? We do not work this way. So we have kind of landed in the middle somewhere. We think a couple of scenes. We sit together and we decide the like next 10 scenes, and I allow him to put those on the cue cards, and he's happy.
Okay, so that's good. So it's actually, so you guys are you're working it out.
Yeah, it works. Yeah. We have one book finished and halfway through the other one. It's worked fantastically.
That's great. Yeah, I always wonder about that too, because I feel like some of my, like the way writing, like as the, the gardener type thing, like for me, it's like it's a very organic process. It's a very unconscious process.
Yes.
So there's a lot of like 3 a.m. wake ups, a lot of dreaming about what I'm working on, a lot of like, just kind of getting smacked with like whatever is next. You hear the word, you hear the the dialogue, or you see the scene, and you're like, you have to immediately go and work on it. And I always think, God, maybe it would be better to do it the other way. But I don't
actually found a new method that I work from now during my work days, and it's really interesting. It's a very well-known method, so you can all Google it. It's called the Pomodoro method.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So what I do, I sit down, I put an egg clock or the iPhone clock or whatever for 25 minutes, and I write for 25 minutes. And when the alarm sounds, I do this in the middle of a sentence.
Right.
I just, and then I take a break for, I think it's 5 minutes that you're supposed to take a break. And the theory is that since you stop in the middle of a text sentence or whatever, your brain keeps working on it, so it kind of is reloading while you take a little break. So when you sit down for your next 25-minute session, the brain already has material that wants to come forward.
And I think it works. So then you do like, isn't it like 2 5-minute breaks, and then after the third 25
then
minutes,
a longer one,
then you have a longer one. Yeah, it's interesting because I actually a few years ago I read a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And I read this book at, I went on vacation with my family, and we were in a complete like sort of hiatus from online stuff, right? Like, because that can be really the most, I find it to be the most reading. And then, and so I read this book, and in this work, he talks about the same thing, but he calls it batching. So when you sit down to your computer to write, that's all you're doing. You don't toggle off to do anything else. And so
that was the word I was looking for, like on a computer when you see
Yeah, exactly. So you batch these, like for him, he says the creative block can be, for most people it's 90 minutes. For the creative professional, it can be much longer. In my case, it can be closer to 3 hours or whatever. But like when you're doing that, that's what you're doing, and you're not doing anything else. And so I have something similar. Like I have my laptop, I'm on my laptop for this stuff, but my desktop is over there. And that's where I write, and it's completely blocked from everything else. So I know that when I go there, that's the space. That's the creative space. And you kind of need to do that, I think, because there's so much competition now.
The Netflix is, the internet is the biggest competition. That's the biggest threat to a writer.
I know, it is. It really is.
I could go down the rabbit hole for hours.
Oh my God, everybody can, and it's like, I always talk, when I, talk to aspiring writers, I always say, it's very easy for you to switch out of the creative brain into that more shallow brain, because your creative brain gets tired. It's like, oh, I'm tired. I want some candy. Like, give me some dopamine, right? Like, and so
that's when you look at cute dog videos on YouTube.
Exactly. Like, oh, look at that, so cute. Oh, look at that light and all the hearts and all the hard eyes and all that, and then you feel better. But like, you can't go back. You can't go back. That's the problem. It takes so much longer to go back to the creative brain. So you just have to you have to batch the time, whether it's 25 minutes or whether it's an hour or 3 hours. So that's what I find anyway. So in my Camilla research, which I did quite a bit of, as maybe you can tell, I found that you are also working on a soap opera. Is that true?
Yeah. It's running in Sweden now. Actually, it's become a huge success in Sweden, and I just came back from a visit to the location where they shoot it, and I
Oh,
did
so
a
great.
very small part.
Oh,
I was a test from the record label. I had
oh,
two
nice.
lines, and they did 2 takes. I don't think they had time for more, but they probably wanted
Yeah,
to do more.
I'm sure they're going to have you back. They're probably coming up with a bigger role for you right now.
Or not.
I thought it was so interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said that it was fun.
I'm sure. I'm sure that, because I think that, like I heard that you used to love soap operas, and I know that I did as well as a kid. Like I used to watch soap operas with my mom, like all my young life.
Were you Team Taylor or Team Brooke?
We were, is that from Bold and the Beautiful? Yep. We would watch Bold and the Beautiful. Yes, Brooke, and Young and the Restless. That was the other one.
Of Our Lives. I watched as well.
And As the World Turns, actually, I was named after the character Lisa in As the World Turns.
That one. I was Team Brooke, by the way.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's right.
Taylor was too good to shoe.
That's right. Brooke was like, she was the cool one. She
was the badass one.
Yeah, she really was. Yeah. It's so funny. And I remember that. I mean, and I think that it's probably true for a lot of, writers that, especially in our generation, that we're the most, we're as influenced by what we watched on television and in the movies as what we read as young people. And so I remember like that idea of that, like, those big stories with big characters and like, these epic sagas that like go on for, for years. I mean, years and years, it's kind of I think it's an underappreciated art form. It's in storytelling.
Yeah, I usually call myself a storyteller, not an author, because I want to free myself from the book format, because I love to tell stories. And sometimes a book is the best format. Sometimes a TV series will be the best format. Or I just had a movie released in April, and that we did an audiobook. So it worked on movie and audiobook. So it differs on the format.
Yeah. And I think that that's really true. I mean, we're in our hearts, we're all storytellers, we're all, especially as crime, in thriller and crime fiction, like Lee Child is always like very famous for saying that he feels like, the like drawings on the cave wall, or that like, sort of first like oral tradition of storytelling, were like these things that we told each other to feel braver in the dark, and I always think about that in terms of crime fiction and thriller, like why so many people turn to, these types of books, because there's always like a beginning, a middle, and an end, some type of justice it's served. It might not be exactly the type of justice you're looking for, but there is certainly something, and that's like not so in the real world. So I think that's really an interesting thing.
Are you a true crime fan as well? Because I'm obsessed.
Yes, absolutely. Of course.
And Rule blurred my first book in the US. And I was like, and we even had some email back and forth after.
Wow.
I was so starstruck, I could hardly breathe. There are 2 people that I'm so starstruck. Many people admire her blurred, but Anne Rule and Bethany. She didn't blur, but she recommended it in a magazine.
Oh,
I was
perfect.
Like, oh, Bethany.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. I noticed that. Well, so I do a little during the pandemic. I started doing a show called 3 Good Things, which is really just me hanging out with my author pals, talking about different things that they like. And one of the things I always talk about is a favorite like sort of go-to or like comfort recipe or cocktail or whatever it is. But I noticed when I was doing my Camilla research that that you have also done a bunch of cookbooks as well. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind. I'd love to hear about that.
I grew up with a father who was really, really into cooking, and he was a fantastic chef, and he always cooked and was really, really, really good. And that after I'd moved away from home, that interest woke up in me as well. And eventually, a couple of years ago, I ran into a friend who's a quite famous chef in Sweden. He's always also from Fjällbacka. And we just started talking about food. And we talked about food for 2 hours. And then we said that, wow, shouldn't we do a cookbook together with food from Fjällbacka? So that was the first cookbook. So we went to Fjällbacka and we cooked food that was fresh from the sea and with the ingredients you can find there. And it was amazing. It's one of the biggest interests in my life, food and wine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
go together.
What else? You know, storytelling, food, family. Like, what else is there really?
Exactly.
There really isn't anything. So you mentioned your hometown or the town where you grew up, Fjällbacka. That figures very prominently in Silver Tears as well. So in your initial series as well is set in that area. Is that right?
Yeah, my first series is set almost entirely in Fjällbacka. And with the Faye books, I wanted to stay away from Fjällbacka and wanted to situate them in Stockholm where I live now. But somehow she just ended up back in Fjällbacka as well. I don't know quite how that happened, but it just felt very natural. So my connection to my hometown is still very, very deep, obviously.
Do you spend a lot of time there as well? I mean, is it like someplace you go often? Is it far from Stockholm?
It takes 8 hours by car, and there's really no other good way to get there. There's no planes, and even train takes like 5 hours. So I don't go there that often. My mother lives there, so maybe a couple of times per year.
Yeah, I feel like that. I mean, it's interesting how places can sort of become characters, right? Like they become like a recurring character. Like I have a fictional town called the Hollows. And then when I write more often than not, I kind of wind up back in the northeastern part of the US because that's kind of where I grew up. You know, I grew up all over. I lived in, you know, the Netherlands and the UK and lived in New York City for, you know, many years and worked in publishing. But I always kind of find myself drawn back in my fiction to this kind of semi-rural, semi-urban area in the Northeast. Even if I don't
always go back, you always go back.
You always go back, even if you don't really want, to. And maybe there's just something about that moment in your life. It's like that's where you're formed, right? So
you have you.
Exactly, and you just have all those details like sort of in your almost in your DNA. And so they just kind of naturally, especially if you write the way you write and I write in this very organic way, you can't make something happen that doesn't want to happen, and you can't stop something from happening.
Exactly. Sometimes you're even surprised. Sometimes I'm surprised, like, what happened here?
You're like, oh my God, really? But that's part of the joy of it.
That? But I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the joy of it. You know, that's like, I always say that, you know, I write for the same reason that I read, you know, because I want to find out what's going to happen to the characters in my head. And so you get that, you know, you get that reader's joy when you, you know, the same way that you do when you open a great book that you love.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to check the questions here. Let's see, how do we have? So if there's anybody who has any questions, you can just enter it into the ask a question box, but there is one in here already. So
and you can ask anything. I have absolutely no filter whatsoever. So
she will answer any question. Bring it on. Nothing is too easy. Oh, yes. Okay. Can we speak more about female power? Sure. I have a feeling we could speak about it all day long.
No, but because I mean, that is, of course, the theme in this book. And there's so much to say about it. And I have so many opinions about that. And they kind of started to form after I was 40. And I think the reason why I kind of woke up when I was around 40 is that my oldest daughter, she's 17 now. And she was starting to like soon enter into the more adult world. And I started to see the world through her eyes and realized that she's not going to have the same advantages as my sons do. And that really, really upset me. And I also started seeing, you know, I'm in the age where people are starting to divorce a lot. And I would see so many divorces where girlfriends came crying and said that, oh, he left me with nothing, and it turns out he owns everything, and I know I signed a prenup, but still I always thought he would help me because of the children, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
And so the message in the book is kind of that we need to take more control of our lives, and we can't just, I am a feminist, but I'm not the kind of feminist that sits back and says, oh, it's all the men's fault, and if they just changed, everything would be great. No, we also have to change. We have to take power of our lives. If you decide to marry someone and give up your education and give up your job and be a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, I mean, I fully respect that job. That is like the most difficult job and toughest job on earth. So that I have full respect for that job.
Absolutely.
But you have to be smart enough to think about the what if. What if it leaves me in 15, 20 years? What then? Then I have an old education. I have nothing on my resume. And probably I'm not going to have any money because I haven't saved up something for myself, and I can't count on him to give me money. So that is a very, very important message.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's so well illustrated with Faye as well, that, you know, you sort of, what we started talking about at the beginning is that, you know, you kind of give up pieces of yourself in order to be part of a relationship. And if you give up too much, you may find yourself down the road with nothing. And not even your own personal power. So I think that's probably why, you know, readers are so relating to Faye and that journey that she's on, for sure.
She's actually caused some divorces, because I had some women in Sweden writing to me that this was the kick I needed to really get out of this relationship. So yeah.
And I think also too that, you know, the point that you make about, you know, the idea of like the feminist, you know, and you look in terms of, you know, just even just in storytelling, you know, just Disney, right? Like the ideas that we're giving our daughter about girls and what it means to be powerful. Like in the early Disney films, like it was really just, you know, any expression of female power was like the evil queen.
Yeah.
Like if you're powerful, you must also be evil.
Yeah.
And then you can see that kind of evolution in their storytelling now with some of the, you know, sort of very powerful young, you know, sort of female protagonists like Moana, you know, and people like that, and Brave, and all of those, you know, there's like this evolution of the young woman taking her seat of power. And it doesn't make you less loving. It doesn't make you it doesn't make you less, you know, less a woman to be powerful. And the word like sort of feminist, like I think it's been, you know, thwarted and twisted by men, right? Because all it means is that I am your equal. Our relationship has to be on equal footing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the day I long for is when we don't have any need for feminism anymore, when it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. That's the world I would like to see.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, the male qualities aren't better or worse than the female qualities. And there's bad men and bad women and good men and good women. I mean, we're all human, basically. So
yes, exactly.
I think it's just about a structure in society that we've created.
Right. I mean, it's very much so that, and that, you know, what we're seeing now in our, you know, in our world, you know, everywhere, I think is the readjustment of this structure.
Yeah.
Right. It's a painful transition for many.
Yeah. And Me Too has been one of those painful transition as well.
Yes.
And in Sweden, we've had a little bit of a backlash where people, even women, you know, are starting to say that, oh, I think this Me Too thing has gone too far. And what if someone innocent gets accused, etc., etc. And I'm quite aggressive there. I think, okay, that's probably going to happen, that someone innocent gets accused, but it's worth it because this is a revolution. That's what I think.
It's a revolution. It is. I mean,
The
that's
change for our daughters.
it
And
is.
I'm sorry, but I'm not going to, probably someone in a sense going to be accused, but that's part of history.
Yeah, and I remember listening to this podcast, and I can't remember exactly what the show was. It was was on NPR, and it was about this man who was running this news organization. He had a relationship with a long-term relationship with his wife, and in the meantime, over the course of 10 to 15 years, he was basically a predator for all these young women who wanted to write.
Yeah.
And I always think about like those young women who have dreams, right? Like big dreams to write or to act or to do something, beyond the norm. They're often like the most exploited, and I thought about my own daughter and her like sort of growing up and like heading into the work world. And it's like, what is waiting for her there? Like where are all and I think it's also important that like, there are so many good men. There are so many good men, so many, brave, smart, strong fathers, husbands, sons, right? Like there's so many good men. It's important for them to embrace like that idea as well. Like I'm a strong man. That doesn't mean that I abuse women.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I have 2 sons and 2 daughters, and I view my task to raise a strong daughter, to strong daughters, is just as important to raise gentlemen.
Yes.
Empathetic men. So I think it's just as important for me as a mother to raise my sons right in how to treat a woman. And I've told them that I ever hear them about mistreating a woman, I'm going to send them to Siberia and they're going to stay there for the rest of their lives. And they're like, yes, mom, yes, mom.
They believe it.
So it's a bit of fear and it's a bit of love and it's a little bit of everything there.
Exactly. And that's motherhood.
That's motherhood.
Absolutely. I have some other questions here. Let's see. Cindy says, thank you all for all the enjoyable hours of reading from both of you. Will there be a follow-up coming for Silver Tears?
Yes. Originally, actually, thought it was going to be only 2 books, but the ending kind of surprised me, as we've talked about before earlier. How things can surprise even yourself when you're writing. And I realized that, it's going to be a 3rd one. And so I'm thinking about a name now because, gold, silver, it has to be bronze. And all that comes to mind is bronze balls, which might be a little bit hard to market. So I'm trying to come up with something else. Yeah, it's kind of good, but, I'm not sure Knopf is going to go yay on that one. Yeah. Even though I'm Swedish and no one expects nothing else from me. So
right. Exactly. I guess it does have to be bronze. You're right. Well, let's do some thinking about it. I'm sure we can together maybe we can come up with something before the end of the thing. There there's a ton of questions. Let's see what says. This actually ties into something that I had wanted to ask on my little list. I think I kind of know the answer is how, it's impossible not to draw comparisons between you and Faye. I mean, you're, such an amazing powerhouse, you're this amazing writer. Plus you have, an investment company, you have a jewelry company, you have, you've been on Dancing with the Stars, you just really
have my butt on TV.
You are an entrepreneur, in every sense of the word. So how much of Faye is in you and how much of you are, in Faye?
Well, 10 years ago, I would not have been that much Faye. I would have been much more like Erica in my Fjällbacka series. But I think over the last 10 years, and especially after turning 40, I love turning 40, I really found some strength where I don't really care that much anymore about what people think. And that's power.
Yes.
So I'm not as brave as her, but I'm getting there. And actually, sometimes when I have to make a decision, sometimes I think, what would Faye do? And I have friends who do the same and guy friends who do the same. So they text me something. Oh, today I had to, choose if I was going to take this job, even though they have a shitty personnel, rules or whatever. And I thought, what would Faye do? And I turned it down. Things like that. So I love that. What would Faye do?
Yeah, and I like that too. You should maybe you should make some T-shirts.
Yeah, or a tattoo. I'm more a tattoo person.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah, you need a tattoo. Perfect. There's another question on here, which is kind of funny because we talked about our parents reading our books, and somebody wants to know: does your daughter read your books?
Well, my children all love reading, which I'm very, very, very happy about. And especially my 17-year-old daughter. Ever since she was 11, she's been an absolute crazy book reader. But she has not, and none of them have been the least interested in reading my books.
Right.
Not the slightest. No. I've even asked, like, when are you going to read my books? She's like, Mom, it's not my kind of books, Mom.
I know. So, my daughter too. She's an amazing reader.
At all.
She reads constantly. She never stops reading, book to book to book. Like there's never an end to it. Zero interest. Could not care less.
Zero. Totally uninterested.
Right.
Well, everything I do is totally uninteresting to them at this point.
Oh my God, it couldn't be more boring. Really. Yeah. They're like, yeah, okay.
I'm doing a reality show in Sweden now where the kids are actually in it. They could decide for themselves. And it's funny to see how they kind of transform in front of the camera, because suddenly they almost seem interested in what I do. I'm like, who are you? I mean, come on. This is freaky. Stop being so nice and polite.
Stop pretending. I know you don't really care. You're just vamping for the camera.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at the
my 12-year-old. He spends so much time on his hair. He's quite vain. So
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the age, right? Like that's like all of a sudden, like when they're super little, they're like so into you. You're like the sun and the moon, and then all of a sudden you become like the sun and the moon. Really, like you're there, but they need you. When they need you, but mainly like whatever.
Yeah, for food and.
For driving, a ride, things like that. Well, there's another question on here that kind of loops back to something that I had on my list as well, and something that I recently just asked of Karen Slaughter, who I interviewed.
Oh, I love Karen.
Yeah, she's like one of my very good friends, and I was able to interview her along with Alfred Burke and some other authors for her launch this week. And, I took a moment to just kind of reflect with her on, the huge amount of success that she's had, which is, so amazing. And we all know this business, how challenging it is and how hard you have to work, to succeed. And I wonder, is there anything that you would tell your younger self, your aspiring writer self, that you have learned along the way?
Oh my goodness. I wish I could have told my younger self that more in terms of that everything will be okay and you will get to live your dream, because for so many years I dreamt of becoming a writer, but I didn't think it was possible, because I had this view on writing as something where you just have to have like this big inspiration falling on you. And it's like a divine thing to write. I didn't understand it was a craft. I mean, you have to have talent for it, but it's basically, I usually say that butt on the chair is the key to becoming a writer.
Exactly.
And I also often quote Elizabeth George has written this great book on writing. And in it, she says that there are a lot of people who wants to be authors, but they don't necessarily want to be writers. And that's a very important point too. You have to be in it for the love of writing. You cannot be in it for the book tours, and you cannot be in it for the signings. And because once you've done a book tour, you realize that you're not in it for the book tours.
You're definitely not in it for the book tour.
No.
That's for sure.
So no, so I would just, if I could go back in time, I would, because I was awkward and I was, felt like I was in the wrong place. I'm a business economist to start with, and I felt so wrong. Everything just felt so wrong. So if I just could go back to myself and say that your dream will come true and you will live your passion, that I wish that could have saved me a lot of anxiety.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's such an interesting thing because I too was a writer from the time I was a kid. I, never wanted to be anything else, never wanted to do anything else. And, but my dad was an engineer, and he was like, yeah, no, that's not a job. You don't.
Yeah. Get a real job.
You get a real job. That's not what you do. Don't move home.
Were you also the fun kid that was always inside reading?
Yes.
And your parents said, go out and play with
outside.
friends. And like, yeah, I'm just going to read a few pages.
I one more chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I feel
we must have been a hoot as children.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Like, imagine we were worried about your kid, like, in a darkened room with a book, when everybody else is outside. And I feel like that's, and so when I graduated from college, I went into publishing. Because that was really the closest thing I could do.
Close enough, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the closest thing I could do without really, following my dreams. Meanwhile, I was still, sort of scribbling, in my free time. But, there came a point where I stopped, I wasn't writing anymore. My job just kept getting super big. I'm sure you found the same as an economist. You're making money, you have a big job. And, I just had this moment where I was like, oh, you're just going to look back 5 years, 10 years down the road and say, you never even tried. Never even tried to do it.
Yeah.
And I was
I decided to write one book because I cannot die without having tried.
That's exactly.
I'm going to get one book. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what I was like. I have got to. I started my book when I was 19, when I was still in college, and then I finished it when I was 29. It's like, thank God I finished. So many people want to write a book, right? But most
fashion had time to change during the time you wrote.
Exactly, it was a whole new era of fashion. It cycled back.
The Cold War was over by that time.
Exactly, bell bottoms are back in, like whatever.
A couple of presidents had come and gone.
But I finally did. it, and I think But I think also those years in publishing, they gave me the permission that I needed because clearly it's a job, right? Like clearly people are doing it, and I think that's
quite successfully.
Quite successfully, and so I just sort of I think that was my path, like to have.
And I don't regret
exactly
that I took the detour from around economists because I have had so much, to take from that in my career as a writer. I learned so much. I don't think I was mature enough to become a writer until 30.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
So I don't regret it at all.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, I feel like those years of trying to write, learning to, wanting to write, learning the industry in the way that I was able to learn it, and knowing that, what I think a lot of aspiring writers don't know is that, everyone thinks of like that publishing contract.
Yeah.
It's like the end of the story. It's like
then it's done. Then it's done.
Put on, I've
made it.
But if you're lucky, all it is an open door to the writing life, and that life never stops being about the page. It never stops being about the writing, ever.
No, but you still also have to do so much footwork yourself.
Absolutely.
The first few years,
oh my gosh, yes.
All over Sweden.
Yeah.
I gave lectures to 5 people who bought 3 books.
Exactly.
In bookstores.
Your grandma, can you buy another copy?
Yeah, exactly. But at the times when I was signing in bookstores and no one came, I took that as an opportunity to chat up the bookseller.
Absolutely.
Really charm them. So when customers came in, they would say that, oh, you have to read this book by this new author. So you really have to do the footwork.
Yes. And I think that's really true too, like for most aspiring writers to know that, like, you're not in it for the book tour. The book tour is as any writer, any real writer will tell you, is not their favorite part. And we've all been to the book signings where there's 100 people or more, and the book signings where there's nobody or 2 people. And that's, it doesn't matter. You still go there, you talk to the bookseller, you sign your stock, you just, make that your happy event, whatever.
I have to come out now because I've been called. I've been summoned. The bookseller. I think that is the key. Absolutely.
Yes.
Because that's how we remember, and it's so hard to, when we're getting hundreds of books, you have to set your book apart. So thank you very much for knowing that and for considering that important. And by the way, these covers are gorgeous.
They are.
I mean,
that
them.
is
and they have
beautiful.
A little bit of an 80s flair, which I love.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Definitely.
And I love it.
Gorgeous. So I have an idea for you for the bronze title.
Yeah.
Oh.
What about Bullet?
Bronze Bullet. That's a good one.
Or Bullet of Bronze or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Anyway,
that could be it.
I want to thank you both. This has been a remarkable conversation. We're so grateful for your work at Books and Books. And yes, we are putting these books in the hands of readers.
Absolutely.
So thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us virtually. I think this is the silver lining of the pandemic, is having these great conversations. And it's just so good to see you, to know you better. Thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself.
It's so nice meeting you both.
It's wonderful, wonderful.
Exciting to meet you, Camilla. I've been a huge fan, so it's been really fun to just hang out and talk for a little while, like we would if we were having coffee or drinks.
Yeah,
right.
and keep strutting that stuff. I mean, I was reading, that opening scene in Silver Tears. Oh my God! Okay, that is. And now I understand why, you savor the espresso and because it's the love of food and wine, and that is all over. So thank you to everyone watching. Remember, you can buy the book if you don't have it already. You can just press the green button. We'll ship it to you, but we also have it in all of our stores. So you're welcome to come by and look for it there. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
On behalf of Books and Books and Miami Book Fair, have a great afternoon.
Until next time. Bye.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.